Am I really going back to micro four thirds? You know, be careful of wishing for new cameras. The S5 iiX, yes, spec-wise is in some ways better.
Such a Lumix Kool-Aid comment.
Dude, I drink that juice in Japan, man. I drink all of that juice in Japan. So in today's episode, I'm joined with Anson, who's a creative based in North Carolina, who is a YouTuber creating content all about cameras. He is also an official creator for the Lumix Backstage Creators and also a big Sigma enthusiast, or personally I like to call him the Sigma boy. And in today's episode, we are going to specifically talk about how Lumix is changing the camera industry one camera at a time, but more specifically diving into the GH7 with the new features like 32-bit float recording, ARRI log, and different things like that. But without further ado, let's dive into the episode. So Anson, just to introduce yourself to my audience. I gave a brief overview of you being the Sigma boy, but give my audience a little bit more context of who you actually are, what you do, and all about that.
Yeah, what's up? I'm Anson, Sigma boy, as Matthew likes to call me. I am a photographer, filmmaker out of North Carolina. I mainly do photography and filmmaking as a hobby. I am a software trainer by day. Run a little small slice of the internet called Anson & Co., where I talk about Lumix cameras, Sigma lenses, and all things L-mount Alliance.
Dude, I think
and micro four thirds.
I think that's now micro four thirds. I think it's really funny. You're a software trainer by day, Sigma boy by night.
That's why I'm wearing a polo. I usually don't wear polos, but I just came from work.
It looks good. It looks good. So before we get into the whole topic and conversation, talking about how Lumix has been changing the camera industry, what the GH7 has been doing and making marks, maybe even what the S9's been doing in weird different ways. What brought you originally to Lumix cameras, the Lumix ecosystem, and because you're the Sigma boy as well, what brought you to Sigma as well? I'll give you it, even though this is the Lumix Creators podcast. I'll give you Sigma.
I mean, it's all L-mount love. What brought me to Lumix was I had a Sony A7 III, and was starting to realize that I'm not, at that time, I was not a photographer. I loved doing video. I loved doing filmmaking type stuff. And so I started looking around for different cameras that were just really good video-centric cameras, and of course the GH5 came out of that. And so got a GH5, hung on to that for a bit, left Lumix for a brief period of time, came back to when I got the S1H, and then went to the S5, and now the S5 iiX, and S9, and GH7 because Lumix is nice and sends me those.
Wait, so you actually, from the GH5, you went to the S1H and then you went backwards to the S5?
Yeah, that was a fun video to make. Why I sold my S1H for an S5 and how many people were like, I would never do that.
Right. I think it's so shocking how the S5 iiX then comes out and it's basically more or less the exact same specs on paper as the S1H.
Dude, people get so invested in the OLPF. That's all it is.
Right.
It's the OLPF is that game changer. And it's kind of that, like, because there's a special sauce people like, or, you know, I have a buddy named Mac Olink, he likes to say the cinema sauce. You know, some cameras just have their sensors calibrated or set up a certain way to give that more organic and filmic look. And that's what the S1H had. And that's why everybody loved it, is because it was a little bit less of a digital look and giving you more of an organic filmic look. And so, I mean, I think that's why people gravitate to it. Even though the S5 iiX, yes, spec-wise is in some ways better. It's missing some of that sauce, in my opinion,
right,
that the S1H had.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing. Like when I was doing my comparison on the GH7, which I got right here, I felt like the GH6 actually, image quality wise, looked way softer. It was a lot more warm. It just had a better overall image. And I know the firmware update is out. I haven't actually looked if you can buy the ARRI log for the GH6 currently. I'm not 100% sure, but
I think you can.
Okay, I'm really curious to test out, since I have the GH7 and I have my own personal GH6. I'm really curious to purchase that and then actually compare to see what the big differences in ARRI log are. Is the GH6 ARRI log going to be way better than the GH7 ARRI log, or is it going to be the exact same? Because theoretically they have the same V-log, but because it's using some phase detect autofocus, it's a different type of V-log. Even though it's the same, it's still different on the end of the day. So I'm curious if ARRI log would be
the
same.
sensors are definitely different,
Right?
Because they had to use different sensors for the phase detect, and I think that's the part that I was telling somebody the other day of like, be careful of wishing for new cameras, because sometimes like those older cameras have that like just that feeling to it, and you might get the specs that you want, but you may do that at a sacrifice of some of the soul of the camera that was there before.
For sure. So before we jump, I guess, fully into talking about, the GH7, what Lumix is doing to the entirety of the camera industry, what's your current go-to camera setup right now? Is it different for YouTube than doing some video work at your company? What are your current camera setup or setups?
My current camera setup right now is primarily, my A camera is the Sigma FP. And I've just gotten to where my podcast that I produce for my day job, and some of the marketing material I help out with was primarily Lumix S5iiX. I'm actually going to be using the FP and the S5iiX as an A and B cam, just because I love both cameras almost equally. And so I'm like, you know what? This is the nice thing about not being a business production. I can make choices like mixing cameras and not having two of the same cameras. But
For sure.
yeah. So I'm actually excited about what that will look like, because I had a lot of people ask me, what the image comparison is, and I hate comparisons. I hate filming it because it's just a lot, and so this would be kind of like a natural way to kind of see the comparison.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot when you were filming everything in, was it CNG?
Cinema DNG.
Cinema,
Yeah.
yep. When you're filming basically everything in 12-bit RAW, and I bet,
Yeah.
what, are you have a terabyte of storage and you only get an hour of footage basically out of this right now?
Yeah, my card before we started said 55 minutes, and it's a terabyte SSD.
Yeah.
For sure.
So when you're doing a comparison between...
And that's even ProRes
that.
RAW. That's not even uncompressed Cinema DNG.
Exactly. So when you're doing that type of filming, yeah, it would be taking a lot of space for sure. I guess well, before, again, diving in, one other question kind of came to my mind was, what is the thing that you love most about Lumix cameras? And what's the thing that you love most about Sigma cameras?
What I love most about, I'll start with, actually, because I've forgotten to answer your questions about Sigma so far, I'll answer the Sigma first. The Sigma, one thing I love about it is just like the organic look and feel of the image. I was watching a stream earlier today that Sigma put on over Cine Gear. For those that don't know, Sigma has a in-house sensor called the Foveon sensor, which is, I actually don't know a ton of the like technical specs around it, but it is really intended to give you like a film look digitally. Now the FP doesn't have a Foveon sensor, but that's still something that they strive to do, is give you that more organic, filmic, old school kind of look. Organic is kind of the word I like to say with this image. And that's one reason I love this camera. I've had it be my A camera for like 3 years now. And so I've just kind of like fallen in love with it just from the fact of like, I know it in and out for the most part. And then why I love Lumix cameras is kind of like almost like all the gaps that the Sigma has for me. The Lumix fills all of those gaps. If I need a camera that I know I can pick up and I don't have to like be patient with, I don't have the quirkiness that I may have with a Sigma. I need something that's rock solid, that I know is going to deliver, that, maybe it is a project that I know I only have one chance to get that shot, or, the footage I need. That's where the Lumix comes in. It gives me all the tools I need. It gives me all of the reliability I need. And it gives me, the ability to shoot not necessarily in RAW, and give a good 10-bit codec to it. So, and I can shoot ProRes RAW if I want to with the S5iiX.
Right. Yeah. Well, now you can also shoot ProRes RAW internally with the GH7. And I guess transitioning now. So pivoting on, I guess now talking about the GH7 though, we both were there for and got early access to these cameras to test out, to use them for some type of long-term loan, something like that. But what I would love to hear kind of your first thoughts when the GH7, when you first heard about it and when you first got in your hands, what was your initial impressions of this camera?
One was how. That was my first thought, was how.
Right.
How is all of this in one camera? My second thought was, am I really going back to Micro Four Thirds? And then my third thought was basically like, this is just a badass camera. It's funny, we talk and we joke about my use of raw video. I haven't shot anything but raw on the GH7. My SSD has stayed attached. The only time I have not shot anything in RAW is because I've forgotten to. Like because we had the workaround where you like flip it into a non-RAW codec to see your preview LUT and then flip it back over. And so like sometimes I'll like flip it to see my preview LUT, get my exposure, and then just start recording and forget. And so that's the only time I haven't recorded RAW. Everything else has been RAW and I love it. The workflow is a little bit annoying, but because I have to transcode because I'm a DaVinci user. But no, it's a badass camera. Like, it really is a camera that I'm fully in the L mount alliance, fully into full frame, and it's the only camera that has thus far like kind of made me question of like, do I want to go back to a smaller sensor and go back to Micro Four Thirds?
Right. Yeah. And I think I'm in that same boat as you. Like, having the 32-bit float recorder right here would be so nice for a situation like this where I don't want to record externally, but I do want full frame. But having those other things like the ARRI log, the capabilities to have raw 12-bit, all these different features. I guess the standalone feature is, what do you love most about the GH7? Is it the raw recording for yourself, which that's my assumption?
I mean, yeah, if there's any indicator of what I've said, it's probably the raw recording. I like the ARRI log. Have I shot anything other than like test footage on it? No. I like the fact that it still has the GH6 body style. I love that flip back and out display. I love the chonkiness to it too. It just feels good.
This camera definitely feels like a beast in the hands with all the different features, with the front record buttons, the grip, the flip up screen, tally lights. This is definitely, hands down, if you're looking for one camera that can basically be a run and gun filmmaking solo creator camera for anything, right, for weddings, documentaries, anything like this camera definitely could do it. I would personally suggest, and I think the thing that I've been really considering recently, which we talked about before, is getting the 10 to 25 f1.7 lens, just to get a little bit more of that full frame likeness in terms of bokeh that I personally really, really love.
See, I might do the opposite. Like, I might go, this is something that I've been really interested in, is like what non-native lenses do the best with the autofocus. Because when you start getting into like speed boosting, you could get pretty close to full frame. And so that's something I haven't ventured into yet, because I just financially just haven't wanted to like put out the money for like a speed booster and maybe a
PL lens.
I wouldn't even do the full, something of that nature. I mean, I have PL lenses, but they can't take boosters.
Right.
They're weird.
Yeah, I think the hard part, and the thing that is a miss currently right now for Lumix, is I would love, and I know they physically can't do it because of the flange distance or the flame distance. Flange, there we go. But
I got you.
I wish there was some way to convert my L mount lenses to Micro Four Thirds, because that's like a perfect like ecosystem. Like, you have Micro Four Third cameras, but you want to move to full frame. Well, you already have your full frame glass like that are L mount, so it's an easy transition into getting another Lumix full frame camera. But instead, if you have a bunch of EF glasses, it makes the transition a little bit easier to move to a Canon camera instead. Granted, now all Canon cameras are coming out are RF, and I don't think you can convert Micro Four Thirds to RF yet or currently, but I haven't
There's
seen
select
any.
stuff you can convert.
Right.
Like, that's the hard part. Is I think like a few years ago, we all were talking about like adapting lenses to different bodies, because we were moving out of EF and all of that and moving into mirrorless. It was almost like you could adapt any lens to any body. And I know even for myself, like I took that for granted, because I would buy a mirrorless lens thinking I could adapt it to anything. And unfortunately, because of the flange distance of all these cameras, you really can't. And that's hard. I can't remember. There's a couple adapters out there. I think there's like a Micro Four Thirds to Z mount and maybe E mount. But even that, I think you lose your electronics, which defeats the purpose of the autofocus
Right.
of the GH7.
At that point, just get a GH6.
Right. Yeah. At that point, if you're going to pull focus, and go get a GH5 for that matter.
Yeah. No, for sure. But I guess also
So-
on another topic though here is we were talking and you heavily considered selling the S5 II, your current personal one, and buying a GH7. Are you still thinking about doing that? Have you finally decided not to do that? What are your kind of thoughts, or what's holding you back from making that type of decision?
I've decided to not, at this time, sell my S5 iiX for the GH7. One of the big things is just lenses. Lumix is making some really good lenses for L mount, and specifically electronic autofocus lenses. There are definitely like cinema brands that or manual lens brands that are making lenses for Micro Four Thirds. But as far as like electronic autofocus lenses, like there's not really many, if any, outside of maybe Olympus and Lumix that are making those, and that limits you a little bit. Whereas like L mount, you have, what did Dustin just post the other day about like
the 35 to 150
making exactly, like more and more companies are making autofocus lenses for L mount. And then you have L mount that has the ecosystem's just growing. As far as the alliance, you have Blackmagic, you have all these different cameras that you can maybe grow into. We just talked about like wishing that we could take a Micro Four Thirds lens and grow into L mount. And unfortunately, there's just that chasm between Micro Four Thirds and everything else, because it's just you can't make that transition to a full frame Lumix camera because it's not Micro Four Thirds anymore. One thing I do appreciate about the GH7 is I think it is one camera that if you really just don't care about like shallow depth of field, like I'm at f1.2 right now, like I should have the nice like blurry background and everything. If you don't care about that, if you don't care about like low light necessarily, this is a camera that you can pick up as a beginner because it's it's around $2,000. I would say like maybe not beginner, but maybe more like it's still in that novice level, and grow into and build a business, build a career off of that camera. It is the path of growth for just the GH7 is fantastic, and that's one thing that makes it appealing.
Yeah, because I personally even launched my own company on 2 GH6s, starting a video production company just on those cameras, like you said, because you have so much room you can grow into it. Like the fact is, like I'm not shooting in ProRes RAW, I'm not shooting in these high codecs yet, but you can progressively if you need it. If you need your client for whatever reasons, like we need you to shoot in RAW, you can be like, I got you. Like I can do this one camera. Definitely the downside, like you said, is it's Micro Four Thirds. But the plus side is we can probably most likely expect some type of full frame camera. Basically, that's the GH7 specs, internals, maybe the ARRI log. They might reserve that for Micro Four Thirds cameras just because it can give a reason why to buy Micro Four Thirds cameras. But definitely the 32-bit float with this recorder. definitely all these different features in the full frame, let's just say S1H Mark II, whenever that comes out. We can definitely expect something like this coming to the full frame ecosystem, which I think is really, really exciting as Lumix creators, but it's also exciting, like you said, in the L mount alliance. I think the big thing that Lumix and how the camera industry as a whole is changing, but specifically with Lumix and also Red, is something called licensing agreements, which has been really making the camera industry as a whole push more and more into the future. For example, the GH7 has a licensing agreement with Apple ProRes RAW. You know, Apple. Who knows what they had to sign to get Apple to be licensed with it? But then also ARRI. Two of the top companies, one in the top company regardless, top tech company, and then the second one being the top company in the movie industry with ARRI.
Right.
It's going to be really, really impressive seeing what's coming to the future. I guess what in your mind, Anson, is what do you think is going to be coming to the camera industry in the future? Do you think we're going to continue seeing more and more licensing agreements or purchasing of companies like Nikon buying Red? I know I've made this comment many, many times. Basically, Red became potatoes while Lumix became bite-sized ARRI cameras, which is just crazy to think about in 2024. But what do you think is going to be coming into the future?
It's such a Lumix Kool-Aid comment.
Dude, I drink that juice in Japan, man. I drink all of that juice in Japan.
I mean, I love Lumix, but that's a statement.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny.
It is kind of funny, actually, but... No, I do agree. I do that does excite me for the flagship full frame, you know, and what could be coming. I mean, the thing you didn't mention is, you have ProRes, you have ARRI log, but you also have like Leica developing, you know, stuff for, you know, co-developing didn't they co-develop the sensor for phase detect?
I think so.
Or they had some part in the development of the sensor. So like, there's a lot of partnerships going along with it. And I think, you know, if anything, if you look at the L Mount Alliance in general and just the concept, you know, of like these brands coming together to create this like, you know, band of brothers, so to speak, to take on the big Sony, Canon, and you know, make a statement in the industry. I think that I wish that the L Mount Alliance would work together more than they already do.
Right.
I think there are some that work together, like Leica and Lumix do. I wish that Sigma would work more in the camera realm with Leica and Lumix as well, and Blackmagic's in there too. Yeah, I think it'd be great to get, you know, a Blackmagic camera that has the reliability and construction that a Lumix or Sigma camera has. You know, like my FP, while it is, you know, that big, it's a tank. Like, it can take a beating. There was somebody that posted on Reddit the other day where they like fell off a bike and on their Sigma FP, and like it was just scratched up a little bit, like nothing major, and it's a small tank. And to have Blackmagic have construction quality like that, or have reliability like a Lumix camera, like, would be fantastic. It's one reason I stopped buying Blackmagic cameras. I do think that, you know, more licensing. I don't think that you can't really say like the flagship, you know, full frame is going to be missing a ton of the features that we see in the GH7. If this is the flagship Micro Four Thirds, you have to think that the flagship full frame is going to be just as awesome. You know, disclaimer, by the way, for anyone that's watching, like, while Matthew and I are Lumix creators, we have no idea what's coming next. And
right.
So,
we typically know like a week in advance.
Yes. Well, and that's if we get the product. But yes, it's funny. Although we didn't know about ARRI log until like
the
it was
day
announced.
of. Yeah.
So, but no, I do think, you know, I'm excited. You know, I don't know if, you know, I think we said this before. For anybody that is confused when we talk about, like we've talked about before, peel back the veil a little bit. This is the second time we're shooting this episode because your boy forgot to do audio correctly. So much apologies. But that being said, you know, one thing that we said before was I would think that we would get stuff like ARRI log or ProRes RAW. I think ProRes RAW probably would be the easiest to say that it would probably have.
Whereas raw 32-bit flow for sure, definitely coming over. Phase detect, no brainer.
Oh, phase detect for sure. I don't think Lumix is going back to anything other than phase detect.
100%.
But I will say the problem with it for me, and this makes the case for the GH7 and even for that matter the S5 iiX, is while that flagship full frame camera is inevitably going to be amazing and make waves, it's going to be definitely out of my price point.
Right.
Easily the thing has to be like $3,000 to $4,000.
Yep.
And if I'm spending more than like $2,500 on a camera body, I break into a cold sweat. And so that's where it is appealing to have all these specs in the GH7. And like I said before, even with the S5 iiX, like it doesn't have internal ProRes RAW or 32-bit float audio or ARRI log, but it does have a lot of these professional grade things. This is a conversation I was having with Caleb Hoover the other day was, if we were looking at starting a videography business, we'd probably get two Lumix S5 iiXs and roll with that for a while. And so I am excited for what's coming. I'm not excited for my wallet, but I am excited for what is to come because I think it will be whatever it will definitely be a disruptor for sure.
So I guess just walk down Dream Lane with me, Anson, here, and spit out some things that you would love to see. For me personally, 4K 60 frames a second, no crop. And it would be cool to see 6K 48 and 60 frames a second open gate, no crop. Like obviously a full frame open gate and with even a 10-minute record limit would be so clutch for so many different scenarios. But what would you love to see in that future S1H Mark II flagship camera for videos?
What we think maybe an S1H Mark II.
Sure. ES1H. They're gonna just
whatever we think
they're
next
gonna dip the
flagship
S
is.
series and then they're gonna go with the M series for Matthew instead.
Yes. That's an interesting question because I literally just did a video a couple weeks ago about like what we would like to see from like a firmware update, for example, from like the FP, and I was like, man, I'm not greedy when it comes to cameras. Like, give me a good quality like 24 frames per second, and I'm good. But if I'm trying to come up with a spec that I would like,
Or even the build style too.
Yeah, ProRes RAW would be a must for me. ProRes RAW, if it's, one can dream and think maybe Blackmagic RAW, but I don't think that's ever going to happen.
I know, it would be really nice.
Has a chokehold on that codec. That being said, I do appreciate the image of ProRes RAW more than Blackmagic RAW. I'm going to put that out there. There's something about it. It's a little bit sharper. It's a little bit more of a rich image, in my opinion. But that being said, yes. Honestly, it probably does come down to physical attributes. I want something that is a cinema body. I hate rigging up my S5 iiX or the GH7. I haven't bought a cage for the GH7, so I'll use the S5 iiX in that example. But like, I hate rigging it up because the monitor always sits entirely too high because the EVF is right there. I love like cube, sure, but like honestly, if in a perfect scenario, I would love. I'm kind of on the fence. If I want to, it's either a cube camera or even like an Evo 1 style camera where you have everything you need in a fully fledged out cinema camera. You don't need anything else. And that would be nice for like internal NDs, XLR, all of that stuff. I think honestly my dream is for them to basically make an updated Evo 1 with full frame and face detect autofocus.
Yeah.
That would be my dream.
I think it would be
And ProRes RAW.
great. Yeah, ProRes RAW for sure. I think it would be great definitely to see some type of body design, even with a screen on the outside that's articulating where you can see what you're actually using so you don't need anything. Maybe a Rosetta handle on the side, maybe similar to the FX6 style body. But if they decide to go more into how the S1H is currently designed, it'd be great to see like the regular version and then the X version cuts the viewfinder and just has that. It's so funny though, because so many people with the S9 are like, no viewfinder, but then everyone on the S1H is like, yeah, don't give us a viewfinder. It's like, it's just like,
it is funny. It is funny because we asked for this. I was talking. This is another thing I was talking about with Caleb. I was like, we asked for a camera that doesn't have a viewfinder, and like because it doesn't have all the video specs that we want, we now just poo-poo on the S9 because like it doesn't have a viewfinder, but it also doesn't like have all the video specs. It has all the video specs. It just has a limitation. I probably peaked my audio there, but it's weird. Yeah. Why do we not like the S9?
I mean, I love it. This like literally today as we're speaking, I just dropped why the Lumix S9 is my favorite camera, because this is like the camera that like makes me not pick up my phone, which has tons of distractions. It makes me take photos in the moment, take videos in the moment, and then put it down and live in the moment. Versus, you know, I take a picture, I'm like, this is cool, and I'm like, oh, let me go beat my high score on Karasi Road right now. But that's not what the S9 does. The S9 just made it really fun just to take photos and videos for fun again for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can live without the viewfinder. I can live without a mechanical shutter or the hot shoe, because like I'm not.
The mechanical shutter is the only thing that
it would
makes
be nice.
me pick up the S5 iiX before the S9. That's the only thing.
What is also interesting though is what also just got announced today as we're speaking is the Sony ZV or ZEV E10 Mark II. I don't know if you looked on anything about that camera.
I saw APS-C and I was done.
Yeah, so it's APS-C. It's $500 less, so it's $1,000 basically. The specs are the exact same besides being APS-C. It doesn't in 1080, 124 frames a second. It's only in 8-bit instead of 10-bit. But the biggest kicker for me that I think like Lumix needs to change on the S9 to make this make more sense than that camera is just the record limits. Once the record limits are gone, this camera is going to be like perfect for most people like who just want to do casual
that's because
YouTube.
Sony's okay with overheating.
Right. But even if it was 30-minute record limits, that'd be so much better.
Sure.
Because like I would use this as my YouTube talking head camera if I had a 30-minute record limit versus a 15-minute record limit. I would use this camera so many different ways, or give us a controller access to control the temperature. So as we're kind of landing the plane here, Anson, just give us your final thoughts on what you are most excited for the camera industry in the future.
I mean, what I'm most excited for the next couple of years is I think we, for the last few years, have been kind of making like iterations of cameras. And I think we're at the point in the camera technology industry where people are starting to really kind of make these cameras that have fully fledged out new features where you're offering a brand new camera as opposed to just like minimal upgrades, kind of like Apple with the iPhone versus like an iPhone S, where it's like that half incremental thing. So I'm really excited about the camera industry in that aspect. I'm excited that there are disruptors out there that are trying to get a piece of their pie. I mean, I think that's one thing I love about Lumix is like, they're punching above their weight, in a lot of different ways. And I think once, people start realizing what Lumix cameras offer, hopefully they'll see that, hey, this adds more value than a Sony or a Canon. And that's not to say, like, I do genuinely believe that the best camera for someone is dependent on how they shoot and what they're shooting with. But I really am excited about what Lumix is going to do in the next couple of years, and the industry is going to do in the next couple of years to just shake things up a little bit.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining my podcast today of the Lumix Creators Podcast, Anson. Where can people check you out, and where do you want to go send all of the lovely people? There'll be links in the description as well.
Well, first and foremost, I should have said this at the beginning, but thank you for having me. Check out YouTube channel, Anson and Co, youtube.com/Anson and Co. Check out Instagram, Anson and Co as well. I tend to have a little bit more personal one-on-one chats there. I've been trying to drive people over there to kind of have a little bit more like one-off conversations. But either one of those are a great way to reach out and contact me. Hopefully we'll do this again and hang out soon.
For sure, man. Awesome. Thank you. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Lumix Creators Podcast. If you want to see another conversation that I had with another creator, check out this episode right here with Caleb Hoover. And then YouTube recommends you might like this video right here. Until next one, guys, peace.